The Bucks dropped game one in their best of 7 series. Was it a total disaster? Are you still confident? We both have our answers. And what are the necessary adjustments this team needs to make to steal home court advantage on Tuesday night? Camille and I dig into that next on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia. You can hear me on the Bucks Radio Network, joined as always by Camille Davis, and you can find her work everywhere. The Technical Foul podcast in full swing right now. I'm sure you guys will have a lot to dig into for the events over the weekend on that one. But we thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for continuing to check out the Locked On Bucks newsletter. You can still sign up for free at lockedondaily.com. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Well, we have already touched base since game one, as you and Frank had the post-game show on Saturday. Not the way Bucks fans hoped it would have gone, as there was a little bit of a gut punch there. It felt like the way that second quarter went. So there are very obviously some adjustments that need to be made here for this Bucks team. We don't know when Damian Lillard is going to come back in this series as well. But let's just start here, Camille, and we can get into the details afterward. You and I both picked the Bucks to win this series.
Mm-hmm.
Does Saturday's result in the optics of especially that first half, does that change your mind at all?
It's a long series. I can tell you, I didn't feel great seeing how the Bucks came out in that game, and it felt like a game where everything went really well for the Pacers. I thought the Pacers did a great job with their defense. I thought they did a great job of denying dribble handoff actions, just denying guys from getting the ball, rotating really well. And it seemed to me like the Bucks kind of struggled a little bit early on, especially with the pace and how quickly the Pacers were playing on defense. So I give the Pacers credit for their game plan and how they came out. They executed really well. And the Bucks struggled. They struggled. And it was one of those games watching where I was like, man, this feels like game 3 in the regular season where it just did not look good for the Bucks. But it's a long series. And I think in the second half, the Bucks started figuring out some ways for them to be more effective offensively that can carry over throughout the series. So not a great start. And there are things the Bucks need to clean up going forward. But you can't get Bucks in 6 without 2 L's.
Kind of straddled the fence there, Camille. Do you still think they're going to win?
Yeah, can't get to 6 Bucks in 6 without 2 L's. I think they still got it.
Famous last words. I am still pretty confident they're going to win this series. And when you get these types of results in the playoffs, any series especially goes one of 3 ways: that you're either run off the floor, you win convincingly, or it's a tight series. But it especially applies to the blowout type of loss, where a lot of times, and this isn't me just touting the corporate line and sticking up for the Bucks, but a lot of times those types of losses can be good. Not every time, sometimes. Think back to when the Bucks were playing the Pistons in the first round in the early 2000s, and the Pistons were really good, and the New Jersey then Nets too. I remember there were some ugly losses, and the Bucks weren't as good as those teams, and those series ended quickly. But there was a very ugly loss, and I don't think any of us would argue this version of the Bucks is better than the one I'm about to reference. But there was a very ugly loss in Game 2 on the road against the Brooklyn Nets, where the Bucks were down by 49 at one point, and you just felt like this might be it. And I get there was injuries in that series, but the point is sometimes you do need this to look at it and say, okay, this taught us what we cannot do, like what we have to do. Still some things you can work through, but this basically taught us what I think all of us were aware of. You got to protect the ball, and turnovers weren't even brutal for the Bucks. Their live ball turnovers were the issue there, but you have to find more things offensively, and that comes down to ball movement and creating those open looks, which the second unit did. So I know Doc talked about that after the game on Saturday, and I know there is a push as strong as ever to break up that starting 5. I guess where I fall is this, and I'm curious yours. I don't have a problem with the Bucks continuing to trot out that starting lineup, but I think what we've learned is the minutes that we saw from that group. Brook Lopez played 21, Kyle Kuzma played 21, Taurean Prince played 20, Ryan Rollins 19. Every other guy off the bench played more minutes. That's the trend that has to continue, and those numbers are probably going to have to swing even more.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that every series isn't for everybody. And we've had the conversation before. We referenced it even with the championship year where that Nets series that you just referenced, that wasn't a Bobby Portis series, but Bobby Portis ended up playing a bigger role later on in the playoffs when he was needed. And that's just the beast of the playoffs, where every matchup isn't going to be for everyone, but everyone has to stay ready and be ready to execute whatever the game plan calls for. And I think for this series, like, you're going to be best off being able to be fast, versatile, and have those shooters out there to kind of help spread the floor. Because one thing I noticed in game one, it just felt like the spacing offensively for the Bucks was just really tight. When Giannis was trying to get to the paint, it'd be someone else standing there or someone else cutting. It was just a little off, a little clunky offensively for them. So they got to iron that out. And then for the guys who are playing, like, yeah, I can understand the calls like, oh, we can't play Brook Lopez at all, and all this and this and this. I don't think it's that drastic, but like, yeah, probably 20 minutes most for Brook Lopez throughout the series, keeping guys fresh. But one thing I will say that I'm kind of curious to see, like, we've seen that the Giannis plus bench lineup has been really good over the last few weeks. I do wonder if Kuz for Bobby Portis. Again, it kind of messes with your spacing a little bit, but thinking of like the idea of when we got Kyle Kuzma was like, hey, we're bringing in Kyle Kuzma to get more Giannis at 5 looks and figure out how this works. So I would be curious to see if Doc tries to pull that lever a little bit more as well, just trying to find the combinations that go along with Giannis, Kevin Porter Jr., AJ Green, and Gary Trent Jr. Like those 4 in particular, I feel like are the crucial part of that. And then that 5th guy could kind of rotate based on what you need. But Bobby had good looks in game 1. They just weren't falling for him. At times, I thought he was a little slow to shoot as well as how quickly the Pacers were closing out. So that's why AJ Green in this series already, I'm like, yeah, that's going to be a guy you need who has a really quick trigger, no hesitation. But again, they got to kind of figure out what's going to work and which levers to pull a little bit better going forward.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, guys like Taurean Prince and Brook Lopez are still important, as you mentioned, but it's the minutes that I think you do have to look at a bit more. And especially look, the fact that you got 2 days off in between games 1 and 2, 2 days off in between games 2 and 3. If you get there, 2 days off again between, I think, 5 and 6. So especially for a team that's not as old as they were, but still an older team, that does give you the ability to kind of lean into, okay, we got to play these guys heavy minutes and we find our spots for the rest of the group. You know how both of us feel about Brook Lopez and his value and importance. And again, there are so many things that are tied to how Brook Lopez looks. The perimeter defense is a big part of that. But I'm not going to sit here and say that Brook Lopez had a good game in game 1. He did not. And it wasn't just Miles Turner. It was, the minutes that Brook Lopez was on the floor. That's what Indiana is going to target because of the pace that they play at and getting Brook Lopez in a 2-man game. It's the exact same thing the Bucks did to Miles Turner to start the game. And you could see Giannis wanted to get those 2-man actions to get Turner onto him, and he abused him in the first couple of minutes of the game. Problem is, once you start to dig that hole, you can't go back to it, that you need to get some different looks there. So I would anticipate that those guys are still going to play, but the minutes are probably going to start to come down a little bit. So that does open the door for, do we see a starting lineup change? And we talked about, look, I think Doc Rivers, and most any coach for that matter, is just going to roll with the same thing until something happens where it's not necessarily a panic move, but just something of, okay, we got to change this. And you can make a very strong case that happened on Saturday. So do we now see a starting lineup change? As we just touched on some of the individual performances, if there is one, what is that starting lineup change that we expect to see or that most fans would want to see? We will dig into that conversation coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. NBA fans, you know what time it is. playoff season has begun. And that means big performances and even bigger rewards. DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for Dash Pass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh, You Score. So anytime a player drops 50 or more points in a playoff game, Dash Pass members score a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the very next day. All you have to do is place an order of $20 or more and use the code WINGSTOP50 at checkout, and that combo is yours. Crispy, delicious, and totally free. The offer is valid noon to midnight the day after the game. Terms apply. So here's the play. Sign up for Dash Pass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. When any player scores 50 or more in a playoff game, Dash Pass members can grab a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the next day with a $20 or more order and code WINGSTOP50. That is Dash Pass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. All right, so if they do, in fact, make a change to the starting lineup, and let's also point this out, Camille. I think the Pacers had 31 points scored in the 4 minutes that Brook Lopez was defending Miles Turner throughout the course of the game. So those are two guys that are both kind of slow of foot, but if Miles Turner is going to be knocking down threes, which he's seemingly done at a high clip, that's going to make the difference here. Brook Lopez 0 of 2 on his threes. Miles Turner goes 4 of 6. That in itself, a big difference. But you got 50 points from your starting lineup, which is nowhere near good enough. Even if we say, well, it's constructed for the bench to make an impact, you still need more than 50, and you especially need more than 50 on a game where Giannis scores 36 of those 50.
Yeah, it's tough. Like when I saw Taurean Prince only had one shot, and it came late in the game, it just felt like, okay, like something is not right. And I know Doc Rivers mentioned with that starting group, just like, hey, the ball movement has to be better for them. And that, again, it's the challenge for Giannis in this series where it's like, I'm sure Giannis knows one-on-one, I can probably go and get it almost every single time. It's balancing that with the notion of like, how do I get my teammates involved? But I feel like when Giannis was spraying the ball out, guys just weren't knocking down shots. And this has been a team that has been a lot better at that. It's just that for the starting group, their attempts, they just didn't get as many attempts up as you generally would look for them to have. And some of the attempts were rushed or the shot clock's winding down. I think for that starting group as well, for their offense, we've talked about playing with pace. And this Bucks team is a team that we know they're not pushing the pace in the general sense, but when they run their sets, they have to play with better pace. They can't jog into places, jog the ball up court, because the Pacers are a team already that loves to pressure in the backcourt. So if you get a possession where they're not pressuring, you're just bringing the ball up and you still don't get into your action until it's like 17, 16 seconds on the clock, and then you're slowly jogging into place, like you're not going to get that many chances to run multiple actions based off of how the defense is responding anyway. So I think for the Bucks, especially that starting group, they have to play with better pace, better spacing. And for the group, as you mentioned, like Taurean Prince, you got to see him get some more shots up. Like we know he's a knockdown, standstill shooter. Create more opportunities for him there. And honestly, knowing too that Damian Lillard is on the way back at some point in this series, I do wonder if Doc doesn't pull the lever of making any changes, if he does, to the starting lineup until Dame is reinserted. And for me, I've been saying it for most part, like I'm a big component of AJ Green being that fifth starter alongside of him with the way that he can shoot, with the way he plays defense. So again, there's some things for the Bucks to still figure out, but for that grouping, because we're still going to see Taurean Prince, Kyle Kuzma, Brook Lopez, maybe some Ryan Rollins until Dame gets back, maybe a little bit when he does come back, but not that much. So they still have to figure out ways to make those lineups effective. And I think the spacing, the pace they play with is going to be really important for them.
Yes, and I do wonder if there is no change to the starting lineup because either the change is Damian Lillard is back and starts in game 2, or that's going to be the change that we go to. I would still say, we've talked about this in the lead up to the series too. Like, let's assume Damian Lillard starts game 2 of this series. I think you have to make a different adjustment outside of that because of what it does to line up your defense. And it means, as we saw in that game in Indianapolis, Taurean Prince is going to be taking Tyrese Halliburton. Maybe you put him elsewhere and you go to Kyle Kuzma if you stick with that starting lineup. But I think that's the biggest reason why it can't be just Damian Lillard back in the starting lineup is your only change. And I'm not pushing for you got to change the starting lineup because, as we mentioned many, many times, I care more about who's closing the game and who's playing more minutes than who's starting the game. There is something to be said about putting yourself in a hole. But we all know a change of sorts is coming at some point with Dame, whether it's game 2, whether it's a couple of games into the series that he comes back and it takes some time for him to start, but that's going to come. I just don't love the defensive matchups if you're going with a backcourt of Dame and Taurean Prince in this series.
Yeah, that makes sense because we've seen when it's Taurean Prince, who's the guy who's in charge of checking Halliburton going forward. But I wonder this too, because in this game, it was a game where the Bucks did a pretty good job on Tyrese Halliburton. I think he was like 3 of 13 from the field. He couldn't really find his own shot too consistently throughout the game, but it was the other guys who killed the Bucks, like Siakam, who has been consistent throughout the year, a really efficient night from the field from him. Nembhard killed the Bucks in this game. So I do wonder if there's something to trying to make Tyrese Halliburton beat you with his scoring rather than letting Tyrese Halliburton get everyone else involved on the Pacers. We kind of had the conversation about how the Pacers might attack the Bucks without Dame, where it's like, hey, do the Pacers just say, Giannis, you go ahead, but we're not letting anyone else do it? Or is it like, okay, we're going to kind of let Giannis see if his teammates can make the shots? I do wonder for the Pacers if they might be actually better off, or for the Bucks if they'd be better off if it's let Tyrese Halliburton try to beat you by himself. Don't let him get others involved because he's glad to get his teammates involved. He's a true point guard in that sense. So I do wonder for the Bucks too, if those matchups, if they do go with the matchups where your backcourt is Dame and Prince, and then they put Prince back on Halliburton, if that's kind of like not a Trojan horse, but like we kind of want you to take advantage of your matchup, and we're going to try to shut everything else down around that.
Yes, I would say the key to that, and I think it was Brian Sampson that pointed this out over the weekend as well, is Bucks Film Room on Twitter. If you do not follow him, which I would assume just about all of this audience does, is number one. That's what the Pacers' approach to Giannis was, of like, cool, man, you can score, but we don't want this to become a 50-point game, but we're going to stay home on guys that you don't have those outlets. And that's where Giannis is arguably even more dangerous in getting those guys, especially the second unit and the shooters that you have there involved. But as he mentioned, the Bucks, for brief moments when they did start to kind of claw back and make some stops, I think the blueprint, and I don't know if he was referring to this specifically, Doc Rivers, but he said after the game, the gist of it was basically, there were some very good things to come from this game 1, that we learned a lot and things that we already knew, but it just reinforced this is what we cannot do and this is what we have to lean into. And I think one of those things, to your point, was for a couple of moments there in brief stretches, they would just switch. They weren't doing that early in the game, and they would switch on Halliburton and they would stay home on their guys to say, okay, if he gets a bad matchup, fine. We're fine with him taking a shot and getting in the paint and doing that, but we're not letting him find guys on the perimeter for threes.
I think there could be something to that. Because a lot of the open shots that the Bucks ended up giving up was they were over helping at times, which they have a tendency to do
a very strong tendency.
Yeah, where it's like you guys just naturally want to help, and it needs to be a little bit more trust individually in teammates of just like, that's your matchup. I understand that, not over helping as much. And allowing for that to happen, because when the Bucks start getting into those scramble situations, that's been a weak point for their defense throughout the season so far. So trying to negate that as much as possible would be beneficial to them. And I'm curious to like what the film session is going to be like, of just watching that film back for the team as they did, of like, hey, we can't do this. Like, this has to tighten up here. This has to be the rotation. Can't help here. So it'll be interesting to see, but I do think that they found something in that second half that they can kind of continue to take forward going throughout the rest of the series, even before Dame gets back.
Yeah, a couple of numbers to point to there in terms of the offensive hubs for both of these teams. And then there's a comment I see out there in our live stream of comments that I brought this up after the game too. So great minds thinking alike there. We'll explain what we mean in the takeaways from game one. And again, try to get a better idea of when do we expect to see Damian Lillard in this series. We'll get into that conversation coming up after this on Locked On Bucks. The NBA playoffs are here, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if that bet wins. You'll love how easy FanDuel makes things, whether it's picking your favorite team or diving into player props from three-pointers to steals and assists. FanDuel has so many ways for you to bet on your favorite player props. And after the game tips, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. Okay, Camille, I mentioned saw a comment that really struck me because it was basically the same point that I made Saturday afternoon. So those of you viewing on YouTube can see what we're referring to, but we'll just mention Forte mentioning, look, if I do recall, the Pacers were run off the floor in game one of this series a year ago. And granted, it is an incredible silver lining to look to and say, well, there was this, but it is worth pointing out that's one of the things that struck me the most during this first half, Camille, was, man, this game feels a lot like game one last year in the inverse. There was no Pacers player that did what Dame did and scored 35 in that first half, but the Bucks trailed by 24 points at halftime in game one and looked about as bad as you could look for most of those first 24 minutes. The Indiana Pacers looked awful in game one against the Bucks last year. They were down 27 points at halftime in a game where Dame had 35 for the game, and all those came in the first half. The similarities don't end there. The Pacers were 3 of 18 on threes in the first half of game one. The Bucks were 2 of 16 on threes in the first half of game one on Saturday. Pacers finished the game 8 of 38 on threes in that game. At one point, the Bucks were 8 of 36. I think they went 9 of 37. And we saw Indiana, despite how bad they looked for the first 30 or so minutes of the game, make it a 12-point game early in the fourth quarter last year. Do you know what the lowest margin the Bucks knocked it was down 12. To? 12 with three very good looks at three to make it a single-digit game. So there are a lot of similarities between the game ones last year and this year. But having said all that, it's just to back up the point that we both made. Look, it's a long series. Mm-hmm. Adjustments are made. You can look bad. Sometimes that's a good teacher to show you we absolutely have to fix this and do these things that worked in the late third quarter and early fourth quarter and use that as a teaching to lean into. It's more to back that up and say one game doesn't decide the series, but you can't just point to, well, Indiana looked terrible in game one, and then they went on to win 4 of the next 5 games in this series because they did that against the Bucks team without Giannis and 2 of those 5 games without Dame.
Yeah, like it's not a perfect 1-to-1, but it's like you said, it's a good reminder about how the playoffs tend to work. I mean, Bucks fans should remember, I mean, even the finals year, they were down 0-2 to start the finals to the Suns before they rattled off 4 straight.
1-1 to the Hawks, 0-2 to the Nets.
Yeah.
Like, other than that Heat series, there were a lot of slow starts.
It happens. And that's the fun part about the playoffs is that it's a little bit of a marathon here. It's a fight. It's a game to game fight. You can't get too high after a win. You can't get too low after a loss because you know that there's still more work to do. And for this Bucks team, they got punched in the mouth game one. Like there is no sugarcoating. They did not look good. They got punched in the mouth. And now it's like, how are you going to respond? One thing you can say as a positive with them being the lower seed in this game is like, at least they haven't lost home court at this part. Like, so far in this series, things have gone the way that one would expect it to. The home team held serve, and now you hope the Bucks can steal game 2. Like if you steal game 2 in Indy, and then you come back home, and now home court is in your favor, it puts the pressure right back on the Pacers that quickly. And then you continue the series out. And we saw that happen last year in the series against the Pacers, where game one, things went well. Game two, Pacers took that, and it's like we lost home court. Now it's heading back to Indy. Momentum is on their court. So you just have to continue to play. And we've seen this Bucks team. I've mentioned it throughout the season. If there's one thing I know about this Bucks team, is that they don't have any quit in them. This is not a team that's going to wither away and be like, well, we got blown out in game one, and that's going to be it. Like, I expect this team to respond in game two and play with a much better effort than what we saw in game one.
We've had a couple of questions. You mentioned you think they're going to win. I still feel confident the Bucks are going to win this series because of what game one reinforced and how you need to play. Doc was pretty positive about his defense. I do agree. We touched on it earlier today, and I do agree with some of the comments we've seen that there was just a lot of overhelping, and especially when you have guys that I don't want to say are like slow and plodding, but they're not the most athletic of guys and quickest guys that are rotating in your help. That's what Indiana was able to exploit. So, like we mentioned, switching more, I would imagine we're going to see a ton of that. They did go to zone earlier, probably than they wanted to in this game. But again, you're not going to catch Indiana off guard as much as we talked about. Well, the Pacers by the numbers, and talked about it with Tony last week, have really struggled against zone. Rick Carlisle's a good coach. I would assume that's a lot of the work is, look, if we get past the Bucks too, we're going to see zone from teams. So let's work on how we attack that zone. So yeah, I'm still confident they'll win this series because I think it's a good thing. Granted, I would much rather win the game. That's a better thing. But I do think there was a lot of good that can be applied to what you saw in game one and how you have to attack. But that brings us to Damian Lillard. And unless I've missed anything, Camille, the latest reporting is just he expects to return in game 2 or 3. I think it's going to be game 3 based on that, of the game 2 or game 3. That would be my guess. So number one, what do you think? Game 2 or 3?
My initial thought was game 3. And then I saw Dame talking to the Pacers during game 1, calling people trash and kind of getting like, just you wait, you going to see. And I was like, maybe it's going to be game 2. But the way that Dame was talking, but game 3 has felt like the good spot of like, okay, you get a little bit of time to kind of ramp up your conditioning before getting back on the court. And it's the first game back home in Milwaukee. Like, that felt like the game where he would come back. But again, after seeing the way he was talking in game 1, I could see him being like, nah, let me get back out there in game 2.
Yeah, that was the interesting part. And we saw a lot of Blazers fans chime in too, like, seen this from Dame before. And the last time Dame was this agitated, you saw what he did to Paul George in a playoff series. But yeah, it's it's going to be one of these 2 games. And, assuming if it's not until game 3, the reception either way, but especially if that's his first game back, the reception he's going to get in Milwaukee for that return, you would imagine is going to be intense. So yeah, it's not an all hope is lost. It's a much different conversation if we see more of the same in game 2 and the same type of result. But I think this was a thing that gave you a lot of takeaways and reinforced what we all already knew and what the Bucks have to do to win this series against the Indiana Pacers. And now we just wait and see if there's an update on Damian Lillard, and if there is any news that trickles out of the Bucks are planning on going with this for their starting lineup. Because I would assume if you do make a starting lineup change, it's coming in game 2. It's not coming later in the series. The later it comes, that's when it feels like, boy, this is a desperation move of we got to try something. We got Dame back. That didn't work. We got to try something else. So let's change up the starting lineup. But, the other thing from the weekend, Camille, was it started with a dud, and you just felt like, oh, man, are the Bucks really going to be that team that puts up the worst showing all through the weekend on the playoffs? And then you saw, no, this is the norm. There was one good game all weekend, and hey, at least you're not the Memphis Grizzlies losing by 50 plus points and laughing it off on the bench.
Yeah, that was rough. That was the game that was on the background. Like, my family was together and people just walked by like, this is one of my cousins who doesn't watch sports. That was like, wait, this is the playoff? Like, this is the playoff game? Like, why is the score so
lopsided? Oh, okay.
I was like, well, the Grizzlies, and they've been bad against good teams all year, but even this is still something different. But I mean, like you said, it happens. The Lakers lost by like 22 in game one. The Pistons had let off a 21-0 run. Like they got ran at to end that game. Like things happen over the course of a game one. It's about how you recenter yourself, get ready for game two. And the Bucks have to come out, I think, too. I saw a couple comments mention it, but just play a little bit more energy too. Just come out with a little bit more effort. This is no longer the regular season. Every possession has to matter, has to mean something. So again, not the best game one from the Bucks, but some confidence still they can build off this and put together a better performance going forward.
Yeah, and one more day, the Bucks did return home after that game on Saturday, as Doc kind of joked about after the game too. I mean, we would have gone home regardless, but if we won, maybe it's a different story. But especially after you lose, you don't want to hang around in the city for a couple of days and have to deal with that. And that's where we can go home, sleep in our own bed. It was an early game on Saturday. You get 2 days off too, and you get some practice time and some time to work on some things that need to be adjusted. So yeah, the big things, you can't get that productivity you got from the starting lineup. You need more than that. Giannis contributed just 2 points via the assist. So 38 points that Giannis contributed in this game. And that's not a knock on Giannis. You got to hit shots. And we just gave you the way that these guys started shooting the ball to begin the game. Totally different story for Tyrese Halliburton, who I think racked up 29 points in assists. So that was one of the bigger differences in this game. And now that's the adjustment for both these teams to make. I would assume the Pacers will take a similar approach and say, let's just limit what Giannis is able to get out there to his teammates and put everything on him because of how deadly that Bucks offense is with the ball movement. And again, as we touched on, if you make Giannis, man, he looked gassed in that first quarter, constantly on the attack. That's going to take away and chip away at his defensive ability too. So that was clearly the strategy from the Pacers. And now the Bucks have to adjust to even up this series at 2 games apiece, coming back to Milwaukee Friday. So again, a lot of time between games this start to the postseason for the Bucks. But we'll have one more show taking a look at game 2 specifically tomorrow and recapping some of your thoughts too. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Are you still confident the Bucks are going to win this series? What's your series prediction in wins and games, and any specific adjustments outside of the obvious of take this guy out of the starting lineup, take this guy out of the starting lineup? What are you expecting to see for game 2? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and Camille and I will address those on tomorrow's show. But Camille, the weekend couldn't have gone any worse for a lot of us. You lose game 1. The good part, it was an early game. Mm-hmm. I got to come home and watch my St. Louis Blues start the NHL playoffs. A disastrous third period. They lose game 1 to the Winnipeg Jets. And then I don't want to talk about both nights of WrestleMania. Just a disappointing weekend all around. Yeah, WrestleMania didn't hit the notes I thought that they would hit this year, but it was still, overall, the weekend in itself was still a good one. Got to spend some time with family and friends. One of my uncles had a surprise entrance back into town. So even amidst all the losing that I was subjected to watching and just underwhelming performances for some of the matches I was looking forward to for WrestleMania, I had a pretty good holiday weekend. And I hope that everyone else out there enjoyed their weekend, even if the Bucks weren't part of the reason they enjoyed it. Yeah, there will be better days, and hopefully that starts Tuesday, tomorrow night. So again, leave your thoughts in the comments. Where do you see this series going, and what is the adjustment you need to see the Bucks make? We'll address that on tomorrow's show. For Camille, I'm Justin. That'll do it for today's show. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.